Hey everybody, it's Atheist for the Cause with a special report for you on the UK elections. They're coming up on the 9th, and I just wanted to get my opinion out there on what I think's going to happen. And as you may know if you watch some of my older videos, I correctly predicted Trump to win. I have a pretty good history of correctly predicting the elections just by looking at the polls and stuff that are out there. And while I think that the polls were slanted purposefully in the Trump election in the U.S., if you looked in France, the polls were right on. And I think the polls were a little slanted in Brexit, but that was also a referendum, and referendums are never as reliable as elections. So the polling isn't. So I think we can mostly trust the polls for the UK snap election. The only thing here is some of these are not just polls, but they're models and things like that, and the models get messed up. Because it is a snap election, that makes it a little different because of when the election happens. So, but let's look at it. So here we have the YouGov, and this is not a poll; it's a model. And the rest that I'm going to mention are polls. So they basically taken a bunch, like 7,000 people. And get and kind of poll them, but they'll keep a running total over a week, and then they weight them depending on who's likely to vote and who's not, and they bring in information from 2015 and the 2010 elections, and then they put all that into a model and come out with these estimations, and then depending on the estimations, they model out how many seats they think that each party is going to have. And it's 326 seats, I believe, for a majority, because there's 650 total seats, so 326 would be a majority. And that's important, so you don't have a hung parliament. As you can see right now, they're estimating a 42% conservative percentage, and that would only result in 305 seats. So unfortunately right now for the Conservatives, it would be a hung parliament, which would mean that according to this estimation, which would mean that the current Prime Minister Theresa May would stay in until they figure out who's gonna govern. So they would need some sort of alliance with another party. And so Labour has 268 under this with 38%. So as you can see, each percentage is pretty big. That's like it doesn't necessarily jump evenly, but if you split it in half, like each percentage is like I think it's like 17 seats or something like that it comes out to be. So basically the Conservatives need to get into the 43 to 44 range to get a majority based on this modeling. I'm just guesstimating, but I think probably like the high 43 percentage points is what they need to get to. And if we look at the Survation poll, the UK Conservative Party is on pace for 41.5%. And the Labour is at 40.4%, conducted in June 2nd to 3rd, which is before the attack in London. And the attacks, I would think, the terror attacks would help the Conservatives over Labour. Also consistently, I'm not going to go through it here, but consistently Theresa May is polling much higher in confidence of who would be the best prime minister. So when you look at all the other information, it mainly benefits the Conservative Party and Theresa May over the Labour Party and Jeremy Corbyn. Then when you look at this is the Opinium. Sorry, I forgot the name of it. Opinium survey. It's a 6-point difference. The Conservatives have 43% of the vote, and the Labour has 37%. So that's about barely where they need to be for a majority. And then we go on to the Orb and Orb International, and the Tories are up to 45%. Labour's at 36%, and the Conservatives are holding at 9 percentage difference. And this says that in most of it, and this is true with most of them, the Conservatives are back up 1 point, and the Labour is down 2 points. Not too long ago, Labour had been really catching up. Just about 2 weeks ago, it was like a 13-point spread on most of these polls. So, but the Conservatives are starting to widen it again. Some of this is natural. I know some of you are wondering why this is happening. Some of it's natural. First of all, you have a snap election. The opposition said it's easy for them to say they're not going to support, the Labour or whatever. But then when it comes down and there's a snap election, they're going to feel like they need to get behind the second, their best candidate, which would be Labour, because they want to beat the Conservatives, since the Conservatives have such a lead. So they need to try to get that lead down, and most people are going to rally behind Labour for that reason. So naturally, you will see the gap shrink. And like a lot of people talk about voting third party and stuff, and that tends to shrink as you get closer to the election. And then as you get like right before the election, usually the lead will like widen just a little bit, and I think the reason that happens is because, the majority group gets cocky, and, they start say they'll go from like the conservatives to UKIP or something like that. And then as that lead starts shrinking towards the end, and when they actually have to go to the polls, they're like, well, I want to make sure that, the Conservative Party wins with a full majority and everything. So it will tend to widen a little bit, because by basically picking a different party, you can kind of give support to that other party and kind of tell the Tories and Conservatives, you don't really like what they're doing. Maybe there's something in their manifesto that you didn't like. They've been coming out saying they want to like govern the internet, like censor the internet more and stuff like that. And you could say, hey, no, we don't like that, and go away from them in the polls, and then be like, well, realistically, I want them to win because I want Brexit, basically. Theresa May has run a pretty bad campaign. She's just like mistake after mistake, with, writing in her manifesto and stuff, all these things that a lot of her supporters don't like. So, and like policies that wouldn't normally be a big deal, I've heard people talking about fox hunting as something like, why even make fox hunting into an issue? If you really want to legalize it, don't even talk about it. Just legalize it, after the elections. But here you have the ICM poll, and the Conservatives have 45%. Labour has 35%. So it's a difference of 10%. And then you have here, this is the Comres poll. I don't know what it stands for, but it says the there's a difference of 12 percentage points, with the Conservatives getting 47% and Labor 35%. So if you look over here, I already wrote it out. The Conservatives have 42%, 41.5%, 43%, 45%, 45%, 47%. Labor 38%, 40.4%, 37%, 36%, 35%, 35%. And then the difference is 4%, 1.1%, that's pretty scary. 6%, 9%, 10%, 12%. Actually, I saw that this was actually 11% because of rounding. But my guesstimations are here. 44% for the Conservatives, 37% for the Labor, and a difference of 7%. And the reason I did this is, you see these little marks, these are strike-through marks, they're meant to be. So I took out the high and the low. And as you can see, one thing that is really sketchy is that the Survation poll has both the lowest for the Conservatives and the highest for the Labor. It would actually make sense to throw this out all together, and because that's pretty shady, and then take out the next take out the next lowest of Conservatives, which would be 42%, and the next highest, the next highest of Labor, which would be 38%. Like, that would drop it 2%, just because Labor is so much higher in the Survation poll than any other poll. Then you do have the 47% for the Conservative as the high and 35% as the low for Labor. So overall, I took all of the rest and I added them together and divided by 4, because there's, remember YouGov is a model, but still you have 4 here. So you end up with an average of 37% for Labor and a 44% for Conservatives, for the difference of 7%. Now, I think this is actually low. Like, I think the Conservatives will probably end up at, they're probably actually closer to the 45%, because as you can see, there's 2 45s and there's one that's all the way up to 47%. So I think 45 is actually probably about where the Conservatives are. But I'm going a little conservative on that side, so going with the average at 44%. The Labor the average is 37%, but I think if you were gonna try to guesstimate, between 35 and 36% makes sense, because you see there's 2 35% and a 36%. So I think that something like a 10% difference makes sense on the reasonable side. So, but if we're just going averages, 7%, and since I want the Conservatives to win in the UK, that's also eliminating more of my bias. So let's just go 7%, but I'm going to add this 7 to 10%. And I think this will actually grow, so don't be surprised if, a lot of these aren't considering the London terror attack and stuff. That will only help the Conservatives. And as time goes on, and because when you actually get to the polls, people don't really trust Corbyn as much as Theresa May to be as good of a prime minister. That's kind of big for the average person who's not really into politics, because a lot of times they will just vote on how they feel about the candidate. And if we go back and we kind of plug that into this, there's no way to really know how the model would turn out. But we can be pretty confident that even a 44% would be high enough for the Conservatives to take a majority. Um, they may get up to, like, I would say right now it's between 44 and 45%. And labor is like, we said something like 37 and 35%. So although the difference is 3%, most of that's on labor. The labor is having more of a variance than the conservatives, which are pretty much in that 43, 45 range. If it does get up to 47, that would be huge for the conservatives. But this 44 to 45 range seems pretty good. So you plug that in, and you're going to be way above that 326. Because if you're at 43%, that gets you to like 324, judging by the difference here, and then you divide by 4. And so I'll actually do it real quick. So if you do 305 plus 268, 573. Oh, I'm sorry. That's not what I wanted. If you do 305 minus 268, you get 37. There's a 4-point difference, 9.25 seats. So add that to 305, you get 304. Add another 9.2, so 323. So that 44 to 45 range is right about where they need to be to get a majority. So they do need to pick up a little bit of a vote here, but to have some comfort, But as the election gets closer, and these next couple days, I expect this lead to grow a little bit. And as the London results start coming in, the post-London massacre, I guess I'll call it, the terror attack, I just expect this lead to differ, to grow. So this difference to grow. So, anyways, I think you'll see a Theresa May victory with with the Conservatives getting a wide margin of enough to get a majority. But as it stands now, they're barely there, but they need to get, I think they will get that little bit of cushion. So let me know. Oh, the other thing is, some of you may have been expecting the Conservatives to just be blowing out Labour. Another thing is, remember, the Brexiteers won. Brexit happened in the sense that the referendum won, and although it didn't actually go out, even Labour saying that they're gonna stick to leaving Brexit. And I think this is really narrowing the margin because Labour has taken that stance on to a large extent, and it's also making the Brexit people, it might make them stay at home. If I heard so many people talking about Brexit when it was going on, people that lived in the UK. I live in the USA, but and now I'm not hearing anything from them, really. They're barely talking about the elections. And the Labour people, they really feel like they lost big time. And they were in the dumps, but now they know, our only chance to somewhat save this is to get out and vote and to have our voices be heard and hopefully not let the conservatives get a majority. And I think you're going to see a depression of the conservative vote, and you're going to see an increase of the Labour vote to a small extent. But I don't think it'll be enough to stop the Conservatives from getting a majority and stop them from widening the gap in the last couple of days, because there's only 4 days left in the election, soon to be 3 days left in the election. So I do think all of the, you know, enthusiasm is with the Labor right now, but that's what's keeping it close now. You know, if it wasn't for that, this would be a 15-20 point difference, but it's only, you know, 4 and 1, it's 1, but it's like 7% around because of the enthusiasm. So keep that in mind. And if you want Brexit to happen, you better get out and vote. You better get your enthusiasm back, or this could get ugly. I mean, this isn't a very large margin at this point. And, you know, some of these polls can be slanted. It can be, you know, the modeling of YouGov might even be, you know, you can't really trust it. It's still a little young yet. They're still trying to improve YouGov. So it's close enough that you do have to be worried. So get out and vote, and make sure you follow through on Brexit. And you do not want, if any, you know, when it comes down to it, you do not want Jeremy Corbyn trying to negotiate your Brexit. I don't really think you want Theresa May doing it either, but I think you want Theresa May doing it much more than Jeremy Corbyn. Theresa May at least has some wit to her. Jeremy Corbyn is, man, that guy is a true idiot. Everything he does is like based off his feelings and quote unquote doing the right thing. Well, that's how you get destroyed in a negotiation. You know, you guys really needed someone like Trump to negotiate out, but maybe with some different social policies or something. But apparently you didn't have a candidate like him, so you're stuck with Theresa May, but she should be good enough as long as you get her into office. So that's what I think. I was right on France. I was towards the end. I initially I wasn't sure if Marine Le Pen could pull out an entire victory. I didn't know the politics of France that much. And then I always said she was going to do really well. As it got closer, it was pretty clear that she would lose in the runoff, but that she would probably get into the runoff. So I did, like, later I did predict that, but I didn't put out a prediction that much far ahead of time. But when it came to Obama, I predicted he would win twice. I actually got every electoral vote correct with him in the 2008 election, and I predicted Trump would win in both the primaries. I was voting for him. Like, I got on behind Trump when he had only 5% of the vote in the primaries, and then it grew. You know, I said he was a reasonable candidate, and then I predicted he would win, and I did get 3 states wrong. Wisconsin, Michigan, and New Hampshire I got wrong, but I got all the other states right. So overall, I did pretty well, I think. And so hopefully you can trust me on this and hold my feet to the fire. This is my first attempt at the UK elections, though, and it takes about 2 to 3 cycles to usually understand these things in full. But I think I have a good handle on and good feel for the UK elections already. So, especially because I did follow the Brexit election, and I was right on that too. So, I'm going to say Conservatives by a pretty good margin. Right now, I'm saying 7 to 10%, and you know, I think they'll get a majority. So, I'll talk to you guys later.